around this wall, and then the living room's right there. And so from around this, she can tell that there's light coming through that narrow window, because there's nowhere else that it could be coming from over there. And so at the time, she had a roommate, and so she thought maybe it was her, like maybe it's a car pulling up, she's just coming home or getting dropped off or something. And so she stands up, and she slowly starts walking up to the door. And as she does so, it's like another thought comes into her mind. And she thinks, what if it's a burglar? And, she's pretty brave. So she keeps going, because I guess what's she going to do at this point? She wants to know. And so she walks up to the door, and she goes around this little wall. And suddenly she's face to face with this gray thing with big black eyes, and it's just standing there. And it was slightly shorter than her, and she's between 5'5" and 5'6". So this thing would have been maybe 5 feet tall or so. And she's caught completely off guard, and she just reflexively screams at it. And then this is the interesting part: she screams at it, and it screams at her. So she's screaming. This gray shrieks. It's screaming, and she said its scream sounded really, really strange, almost bird-like. So it's shrieking at her like a bird, basically. And she just keeps screaming. Like, she screamed, and she screamed at it. It screamed back at her, as if it didn't expect her to be there. Like maybe she wasn't supposed to be awake. And she regains her senses enough to turn around, and she takes off running. And she runs through the living room towards the kitchen. And she turns around, and she gets struck by this sort of magnetic energy. And she struggled to describe it, frankly, because it was pretty far outside of her experience. She said, it was almost like electricity, but it felt like her whole body was vibrating, and she was paralyzed. And when she struck by this beam, the entire room was lit up with the same bright light that she said she had originally seen, just sort of coming in through the front door area.
Interesting.
And as she struck by it, oh, go ahead.
I said, no, interesting.
Oh, okay. And as she's struck by this thing, she's paralyzed, and she feels herself being lifted and pulled back to the couch. And as she's getting pulled back to the couch, she feels like this magnetic tingling sensation, basically everywhere. And again, like the whole room is filled with this bluish white light. And she's helpless. There's nothing she can do about it. And she gets pulled back towards the couch, and she closes her eyes because she's just terrified. And, she tells me that she was just floating. She was levitated above the couch, and then she was lowered back down onto it. And as soon as she hit the couch, she opened her eyes and she could move again. And everything was gone. No gray being screaming at her, no light, nothing. And it's interesting because she told me the entire time that she was floating, she was telling herself, they're going to make you think this is a dream. They're going to make you think this didn't happen. It did happen. Don't forget. And she doesn't even know necessarily why she told herself that. I have my own hypothesis.
What's yours, Tobias? What do you feel was going on?
I think this has happened to her before. I think it's probably happened to her more than once, and she did forget, and because somebody made her forget. And so this time, I don't know if it represents her building up some kind of resistance, but this time she did resist. This time she woke up before they got to her, and this time she remembered. She remembered what the hell happened to her. So that's what I think. She said that she didn't have any conscious memory of any other abduction experience or anything similar. But again, if they were making her forget, she wouldn't, would she? And I think that it's very telling that she had this impulse to really adamantly remind herself in the moment while it's happening, don't forget. They're going to make you think this is a dream. They're going to make you think this didn't happen. It did happen.
Well, what's scary when I think about this, the two things I go in my mind, taking her DNA or taking her eggs, one of the two.
You never know. Yeah, I mean, anything's possible, frankly. Like I said, she doesn't have any conscious memory, but you're absolutely right. Very often when people talk about these abduction scenarios, they all include things like medical experiments. And, with women, and with men also, but, in a different way, of course, there is this sexual element to it where, you will have, bodily fluids taken, you'll have reproductive material taken. And it's pretty, I don't even think jarring is the right word. Scarring is probably better. It's upsetting to people, and then you'll have people talk later, in later, abduction, encounters or experiences or whatever, about how, they'll see the results of that. You'll have people talking about, abduction experiences where they're introduced to their own hybrid children, where they are encouraged to interact with them or even nurse them. So, the whole thing is, in my opinion, pretty gross and invasive and, generally just sort of upsetting, not to mention terrifying, of course. But, you're absolutely right. I mean, I don't think it's weird that that's where your mind went, because I think that's a perfectly natural place for it to go, considering the history of the abduction phenomenon and what people have reported, So, I mean, that we don't know. Like, it's possible that that's exactly what she had interrupted. Maybe that's why she felt so strongly about it, because that's the other part, clearly, she was of a mind that, she was going to fight back, or she was going to resist at least. And I think that makes a lot of sense in context, especially if she had prior experiences that were similar to sort of what we're talking about, these experiences of being very intimately violated. I think that she would be very motivated to fight back, and I think that she would be very motivated to want to interrupt this process, and I think she would want to be able to do anything she could, to combat it, which is what she did. So, and there was no missing time with her, by the way. So at no point do I think she was actually abducted. I think that she did successfully resist this effort, because there was no point, like even when she had her eyes closed in fear, she didn't suddenly wake up on the couch and it was, 4:00 in the morning or something. It was still right after when she had woken up, basically, to go check and see what that light was. So, yeah, I think that she interrupted whatever they were trying to do. So, sorry. Anyway, I think you were going to say something.
No, what is she, a younger woman?
Yeah, actually, she was only 21 years old when this happened, and this was this was spring of 2018. Yeah,
that concerns me more, because like a lot of the guests say that they felt like their DNA was taken, or other, like you mentioned, items taken from them during the abduction. And maybe, again, with younger, because it seems to be a lot of reports of younger women, not older women, but, younger women claiming that, their eggs were removed or a certain amount of eggs and stuff like that. And they felt very violated.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you think about it, 21, that's prime reproductive. That's a prime reproductive age for a human being. Bet, like her story that I told earlier, she was only 18. So we've got an 18-year-old woman in 1986 with 4 hours of missing time. We have a 21-year-old woman in spring of 2018, and if you go through reports, you'll see pretty consistently that when people talk about abduction experiences, they generally start pretty young, and they're pretty consistent throughout adolescence into early adulthood, and then they sort of taper off as you get older.
Right.
And there's something to that, and it certainly fits the narrative described by experiencers when they talk about what's happened to them in the sort of medical experiments performed. It definitely fits that narrative. Considering, there are lots of important biological changes happening in human beings throughout childhood and adolescence, and then you get into early adulthood, and those are your prime reproductive years. And so, if that was an interest to somebody or something, then it makes perfect sense. It makes absolutely perfect sense for them to be taking.
Especially if you believe there's hybrids, walking the earth, or they're aliens trying to create hybrids. Like I said, I've got reports from men saying that their sperm was taken. I've had reports from women that claim that their eggs were taken from them, and not just one time. It's like every time they were abducted, they took more eggs and stuff like this. It does make as much sense as anything else does in the abduction cases.
Yeah, absolutely. We're sort of in the position where, we have to try to solve this mystery without being able, to confront it most of the time. So what we're left with is the experiences of the people being taken, and then any other sort of, peripheral evidence, so if they have, marks left over on their body, which a lot of people do, or, maybe there is a corroborative UFO sighting or something in their area, which happens sometimes. But that's about all we have to go on. And you're absolutely right that, if you look at the stories people are telling, if you look at the experiences that these people are having and are relating, then that makes a lot of sense. And it's not even a modern phenomenon. I as well as many other researchers are reminded of stories of things like changelings, changeling babies. So if you look at sort of like especially common in like Celtic fairy lore, there's this idea of fairies coming from fairyland and taking human babies, and sometimes they'll take human women, and they'll sometimes in the old fairy lore they would take human women to nurse their babies, or they'll steal human babies because they need to replenish their breeding stock. And this is hundreds of years ago, of course. So it doesn't even seem to be a very new phenomenon. Honestly, it seems like something that's been with us for a very long time, and that's pretty terrifying. I think the idea that sort of hidden beneath the surface of human experience is this whole other level, this